Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom, when you're ready to see glucose in a whole new way. And by No Foods. No grain, no gluten, no guilt.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, actress Jennifer Stone, best known as a teen actor on the Disney Channel, grown up and talking about her type 1 diagnosis 4 years ago. When it happened, she was told to give up her dreams of acting.
Diabetes has been difficult, but it's been such a blessing in so many ways because it's brought not only experiences I would have never had, it's opened me up to people I would have never met, and it's also made me so much stronger and so much more of a fighter than I ever was before. And so, yeah, I definitely thought maybe they're right. But at the end of the day, I realized that they could not be more wrong.
Jennifer also shares some great stories from her days on the hit show Wizards of Waverly Place and talks about her new projects due out later this year. In our community connection this week, after 58 years with type 1, Trudy Peters says you can do well without being perfect.
I'm human. I've been a wife, a mom, a teacher. I'm a grandma now. And actually, all those things are what made me know I had to take care of myself.
Trudy shares how she's transitioned over the years to technology and what she thinks has helped her the most. In our Now You Know segment, how a spider web inspired a new way of looking at implanting islet cells. And remember, I'm not a doctor, and this show is not intended as medical advice. It all starts now on Diabetes Connections. Welcome to another week of the show. So glad to have you with us. I'm Stacey Sims, and Diabetes Connections, if you're new, is here to educate and inspire, sharing stories of connection from actors, like this week, athletes, leaders in our field, authors, bloggers, speakers, as well as conversations with healthcare companies and the tech folks that keep pushing us along, and the everyday people who are living with diabetes. My son has type 1. He was diagnosed just before he turned 2 11 years ago. My husband has type 2 diabetes. I don't have diabetes. I have a background in broadcasting as a local radio and television reporter, and that's how you get the podcast. When I saw that Jennifer Stone, the actress that I'll be talking to in just a couple of minutes, was coming out to talk about her diagnosis with type 1 diabetes, it really struck a chord with me because my kids loved Wizards of Waverly Place. If you're not familiar, she played the role of Harper Finkel, who was like the quirky sidekick best friend, but just a strong, smart character, the kind of character you don't see a lot put out there for young women. And we always loved her. Harper really was our favorite. And this was back when I had to, I would sit and watch TV with my kids, and you'd always kind of groan because some of these shows were so bad, but this one was good. And of course, my kids are a lot older now. So it was interesting to talk to Jennifer about those days and about what she's facing now. And speaking of my kids getting older, Benny's bar mitzvah is this coming weekend. So, I'm excited to actually get the podcast out. And next week's as well is going to be a challenge. But we are so excited about this. Such a huge milestone for him. And towards the end of the show, I'm going to come back to that because this was a milestone in terms of diabetes. I'd always had this in mind about this is going to happen by this time. Many of you were told when you were diagnosed, there'll be a cure in 5 years. Well, we were luckily never told that, but we were told something else. And I'll share that at the end of the show and how it ties into Benny. And I also want to share a great email I got over the holidays from Karen. And Karen was looking at my website to find out where I was going to be speaking. And unfortunately, I don't have that on the website yet. We are working on a whole website redo that I hope to get out the first quarter of this year, but we shall see. But there are a lot of speaking engagements that I'm doing, and I'd love to come and speak to your group. So please just reach out and let me know. But Karen writes, while I was looking, I came across an old photo in one of your blogs of Benny at a bar mitzvah with Andy Lubell. Andy was once my next-door neighbor, my son's pediatrician, and now both our sons play tennis at the same sports center. You were right, 2 degrees of separation for everyone in the type 1 community. And Karen, you are exactly right. I mentioned that in a recent episode when one of the people I interviewed turned out to have been the patient of another doctor I interviewed in a different show, unbeknownst to me. It's just such a small world. And I will put that picture up on social media because it's a great picture. I'll tell you the story real quick about Andy Lubell. Benny was at a party. His blood sugar was very high. He was getting kind of down because everybody was moving on to dessert. And I think it was just a missed bolus or something. And I remembered the host's brother, Andy. I remember she told me that he had type 1. And maybe I shouldn't have done this, but you wouldn't mind, right, if somebody did this to you. I went over to him and I said, look, Andy, we'd already met earlier that day, so this wasn't the first time I had spoken to him. And I said, Benny's really feeling down. I noticed you have the same insulin pump. Is there any way that you could just kind of give him an attaboy? And I think Benny was probably only about 7 years old at this point. And Andy came over and hung out with him for an hour. They took crazy pictures together, which is one of the things I'll post. I don't think they talked about diabetes at all, but just knowing that he wasn't alone and that somebody else understood what it was like made a huge, huge difference. And now that the picture keeps paying off, it keeps finding more connections. So hopefully I'll be able to talk to Karen soon, and maybe we'll swing back and talk to Dr. Lubell as well and get his take on that. Quick word from Dexcom now, one of our sponsors. And when we look at the Dexcom throughout the day, as we have for more than 4 years now, it's incredibly helpful to head off highs and lows and to help us help Benny manage his diabetes. But we also love Clarity, the diabetes management software system from Dexcom. It's an easy way to keep track of the big picture. I check it about once a week, and it really helps me dial back and see longer term trends, helps me to not overreact for happen for just one day or even just 1 hour, because I can do that. And you get overlay reports. It helps put context to the patterns, and then you can send Clarity reports right to your care team, and it helps them prioritize the real issues. I love that. Find out more at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. My guest this week is best known for her role as Harper Finkel on Wizards of Waverly Place, which was a huge sitcom on the Disney Channel. It went off the air in 2012, but Jennifer Stone is still a big fan favorite. And honestly, Wizards was my kids' first live action show. When they go from watching cartoons to then seeing a real TV show. And we watched every episode, the movie, and even played the Nintendo DS game. We are hardcore. Harper is the character that everybody loves. Really sweet. Isn't that funny? Well, Jennifer, let's bring her right on. Jennifer was diagnosed with type 1 4 years ago, and she's just announced a new role in a movie for next year. Jennifer Stone, welcome to Diabetes Connections.
Well, thank you for having me. And what a sweet opening. Thank you.
Oh, I'm not kidding around. I hate that you've joined our community, but I'm so excited to talk to you because that was the show, and I specifically remember it was New Year's Eve at my parents' house, and the older cousins were watching Wizards, and I was like, is this appropriate for my children? And they loved it. They were little. And then we watched every episode. I'll tell you more later, but this morning, when I was asking my son if he wanted me to ask you anything, he recited chapter and verse from the movie. So we're going to have some fun.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, he was like, ask her about this.
Impressive.
Oh, he's so funny.
That's very sweet of him.
It's great.
Well, tell him I said thank you.
You got it. Okay, so before we talk Wizards, let's talk diabetes. Can you share your diagnosis story? How did you find out you had type 1?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really bizarre. So I was 20 years old, and I noticed that my eyesight was starting to go. I couldn't, faces were really blurry. I couldn't read street signs or, license plates. Going to the grocery store would exhaust me. I'd be done for the day. You know what I mean? So regular tasks would wipe me out. And I started gaining a lot of weight really quickly. I think I put on, 60 pounds in 2 months. So my joints were really shot. And so I thought I had a thyroid issue. So I went to the doctor, and I had a bunch of tests done, and they ultimately concluded that it was type 1 diabetes, which I didn't know that you could even, I always thought okay, you get that when you're a kid, type 2 is what you get as an adult. But no, I was shocked to find out that it was actually type 1. And that sort of started my journey of sort of finding out the right medications for me and finding out how to treat this the best for my personal diabetes.
I'll be really nosy. And again, you don't have to answer this, if you don't want to, but gaining weight is not generally a symptom of type 1. What happened?
Well, and no, you feel free to be nosy, because that's my biggest, no. Well, and that's my biggest thing with this is I feel like I'm not helping people if I'm not honest about what I go through. So I have something that is kind of bizarre. They call it type 1.5. And basically what it is it's, so you know how type 1 is an autoimmune disorder, right? And so the beta cells, they destroy the function of the body that produces insulin and the cells that make insulin, right?
Right.
So, and that's what produces type 1. So I have this weird in-between where all of my beta cells have not destroyed all of the cells that produce insulin yet. They will eventually. So eventually I will be a full-fledged type 1, but I am somewhere in between. So that's why I just say, it's like, hey, I'm a type 1 because that's ultimately where I'll end up. But that's why I display symptoms between 1 and 2, because I'm edging closer and closer to type 1, which is part of the reason they think that I was diagnosed so late.
Hmm. And, as you listen, we've talked about type 1.5, I guess, which is also called LADA or LADA. I never know how to pronounce it, but it's latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. And it's, right. I mean,
well, thank you for actually knowing what it is. I can't tell you how many endocrinologists I actually went to that there was a lot of endocrinologists. It took me a long time to find a doctor that was like, that believed me. There were a lot of them that was like, no, you're snacking which was infuriating. I was like, no, I don't know what this is, but it's like, it was so thank you for being educated and knowing that exists. I
can't imagine how frustrating that must have been.
Oh, it was infuriating. I cried in a lot of doctors' offices. Like, it was very frustrating.
What was your reaction when someone finally said to you, yes, this is diabetes, whether it was they gave you that LADA diagnosis or just said it's going to become type 1, but here are the tools to live with it. Was it a relief to finally get that?
Oh, of course it was. I mean, it was something that because I went through, I think, 2 or 3 endocrinologists before I found the one that I have now, who has been a godsend. She just was like, yeah, you're not the average case. You're not the everyday case that walks in the door, but you're valid. Like and to have somebody validate your struggle and validate what you've been going through when people look at you and say that your reality is not real is just, it's a priceless experience. And I will be ever grateful to my doctor for that.
So you mentioned already that you really didn't know much about type 1, like most of us. I mean, I was a health reporter for years and years, and I always had to kind of remind myself the difference between type 1 and type 2. And then when my son got it, I was like, oh no, I don't know anything. So how did you get more educated? Did you talk to this doctor more? Did you reach out to anybody else you knew with type 1, or was this, all right, just on you?
Well, God bless my mother. I mean, my mother she's a strong Southern lady. I mean, because to be honest, when I was first diagnosed, I was really, not only was I physically tired, but I was mentally exhausted. And my mother was the warrior that I needed to be at first. And so she really researched. I mean, she got on a website that I actually am a global ambassador for now, Beyond Type 1. And she did a lot of research, and we were kind of on our own a bit, but we definitely, I have some friends in the industry that are type 1, because I had a lot of doctors tell me that, like, look, hey, you're going to have to quit acting. You can't be an actor and have type 1. Well, because mine is really, I'm very sensitive to stress. So my blood sugars will spike. I mean, I feel like every diabetic is sensitive to stress, but I'm especially so. So because of that, I had doctors say, it's a stressful business. You can't have this and have your reaction to stress with your diabetes. You're going to have to quit. And I was heartbroken. So I reached out to some of my friends that are in the business that have type 1. And I asked them for what doctors they would recommend, because the ones, like I said, the ones I was finding just didn't understand diabetes in the entertainment industry, and they didn't understand that it can coexist. those friends and the strength of my mother are the two things that helped me sort of get on my feet when I felt like, the rug was sort of pulled out from under me when I was first diagnosed.
It amazes me how most of the kids who are diagnosed with type 1 are told you can do anything. But I've talked to many adults and young adults who've been told you'll never ski again, you'll never compete again, you'll never, give that up. And so it's amazing to me to hear those stories and to know that, you all have such passion for what you're doing that you reject that advice. Did it go through your head that maybe you should stop acting? And we'll find out what Jennifer has to say about that. And her answer is kind of bittersweet. We'll find out in just a moment, but first, a quick word from one of our sponsors from One Touch. For 7 years, One Touch Vario test strips have delivered reliable results you can trust. And did you know they have the lowest copay on the most health plans and are always covered on traditional Medicare Part B? To upgrade today to the One Touch Vario Flex Meter, visit diabetes-connections.com and click on the One Touch logo. Coverage and payment may be subject to coinsurance, deductible, and patient eligibility requirements. LifeScan does not guarantee coverage or payment. Now back to my interview with actress Jennifer Stone, and we pick up where she's talking about her reaction to being told she probably shouldn't go back to acting after her diagnosis.
I definitely, at first, because like I said, I felt like when I was first diagnosed, I felt like the wind was knocked out of my sails.
Yeah.
Because it's life-changing. It's life-changing. And I'm a big proponent that you have two choices. You can either let it win, or you can learn to make your life better because of it. And thankfully, I reached a point, which is why it took me so long to come forward with the fact that I have diabetes, was I wanted to get to a place where I made my life better because of it, and I could be inspiring to other people. So it was something where it took me a while. It took me 4 years to get to a place where I was like, you know what, I'm not going to let this go. But yeah, I took a break. I went to school. I actually went to school for nursing because I wanted to have a backup in case they were right.
Wow.
And I also wanted to learn more about my disease. But at the end of the day, I'm so thankful that that's how it turned out, because I'm a big proponent as well of women being educated. And so I'm thankful that that was the way it turned out, and I got to go and get an education and learn not only about my body, but have that experience outside of this business, because this business can be a bubble. Mm. And so diabetes has been difficult, but it's been such a blessing in so many ways, because it's brought not only experiences I would have never had, it's opened me up to people I would have never met, and it's also made me so much stronger and so much more of a fighter than I ever was before. And so, yeah, I definitely thought maybe they're right. But at the end of the day, I realized that they could not be more wrong.
Yeah. And of course, there's nothing stressful about final exams in college or, nursing. So
and also too, and it's so true. But to be honest, in school, I learned how to manage stress.
Oh.
That was one of the places that not only did I take classes and educate myself in what my classes were in, I educated myself in how to manage my diabetes and my stress with stressful situations like exams and like classes and like physio finals, where you've got 2 hours to take it and it's 14 pages with 5 full-length, Bob's got this and this is wrong with him, tell me what happened and how you fixed it, and you got to write it all out. I had carpal tunnel by the end of that final, but I managed my stress. So it educated me in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that's great. So what kind of diabetes gear do you use? I saw a bit of that video you made for Beyond Type 1. So I saw you wear a continuous glucose monitor and a pump?
Yeah, I just switched over to a pump. I was using pins for the bulk of the time after I was diagnosed, but I just switched over to a pump because I was getting a lot of scar tissue on my stomach. And also I just got tired of everyone thinking I was a drug addict, whenever I was out. Because in LA, I've been at parties and people are like, hey, can I have some of that? I'm like, well, you're probably just going to get really shaky.
Oh, my gosh.
No. Yeah, LA is a weird place. But yeah, so I have a CGM and I have a pump at this point. So
again, nosy questions. Insulin pump going okay for you?
It's going great. It's made my life a lot easier. I know people have different preferences, but it's made my life a lot easier. It's definitely an adjustment figuring out where to put it with certain clothes. Or if I want to take a long shower, it beeps at me and I'm like, yes, I know I'm unplugged. Stop it. But other than that, it's been wonderful.
So can we talk a little bit about Wizards of Waverly Place and your acting, and then we'll get back to diabetes?
No, gladly.
Okay, great.
Gladly.
Great. How did you get involved in acting in the first place? It just looked like it was so much fun for you. Is it something you always wanted to do?
Yeah, my mom jokes that it's a hobby that got way out of control because I have an older brother who was like addicted to video games as a little kid. And one summer my mom was like, you're not going to play video games all summer. Find something to do. So he found this like audition for To Kill a Mockingbird. And so he got Jim Finch. He got like the lead role. And so I was the little sister that was dragged to all the rehearsals. And so I wanted to be just like him. And so I was like, I'm going to do this too. And I did my first play after that. And of course he got a lead and I got a very small part. And I fell in love with it. I had one line and it was the best 5 seconds of my life. And I was hooked. I was totally hooked right away. And I fell in love with it. And I think I was 6 at the time. And I've been hooked ever since.
Do you remember auditioning for Wizards of Waverly Place or anything from that very early experience?
Yeah, I do actually. I was back in Texas. I had done a pilot for Disney previously. I was back in Texas. I was supposed to go to, I think it was like camp with a friend of mine, or we were about to go on vacation. I was about to go on some trip or something. And Disney called and they were like, hey, we want you to come out and audition for Alex, actually Selena's part. And my mom was like, oh, Lord, because I had done that before. I'd flown out to California for different stuff and I hadn't booked it and it, and it screwed up, like, whatever. It's always, the joke is you always make a trip and that's when you get a call.
Right.
And it never fails. Right. It's always that way. And so my mom was like, oh, Lord. So she was like, all right, well, and she's like, you really want to do this? I was like, yes, of course. Again, I'm still that 6-year-old whenever it comes to acting. Like, it's still my passion. It's still what I love to do. And so I flew out there and I auditioned for Alex, and that's what I'd prepped. And then right when I was in the audition room, they handed me the Harper sides, and they're like, try this one out. And I was like, oh, geez, like, I flew out here to hand me sides, like, I haven't even worked on, I haven't even gone over. And so I took like 10 minutes in the waiting room and did the best I could, basically cold reading it. And then we did a chemistry read right then and there after I went in and read it with me and Selena, and it worked. It worked really well. I mean, we gelled and it made sense. And the chemistry that you see with like the Hat song and with Harper and Alex was just there. and it was one of those moments where it was just like, yeah, this makes sense. And so yeah, it was a cool experience. And thankfully the camping trip or vacation was not missed in vain.
That's what I was just going to ask you. Did you ever get to go on that trip?
I don't think so. I think I missed it. But it was well worth. It was well worth missing.
Did you move to California or did you commute?
Well, I commuted for a long time, and then after Wizards, I officially moved.
I always wonder about that, especially with kids. It's hard on families.
Yeah, because like I said, I have my older brother. My parents, I'm very thankful for them because my mom, she came out here with me like 6 months out of the year. And then my dad was with my brother while he was in high school. Mm. So we made it work. And then when I shot the pilot, like I think my brother, he was going through something with high school. And so my mom, she had to leave me with somebody in LA, like a family friend in LA while I was shooting the Wizards pilot because she had to be there for my brother. So I have so much love and respect for my parents because they did a beautiful job of balancing my passions and my brother's passion and being there for both of us as best they could. I mean, obviously they can only be one place at a time, but they found a really beautiful balance of that.
Wow. It's great to hear. So, as I said, Wizards of Waverly Place and the role of Harper always looked like a lot of fun, but obviously this is also a lot of work. What was it like on that set? I mean, you grew up, it was a 5-year deal, right? I mean, you started with other kids who were the similar age as you, and then everybody gets older. And was it fun? Was it work? What's that like?
It was a blast. It was my high school, I mean, I always say they're my second family, and we're always going to have a bond that, I mean, we go our separate ways, we grow up, we move on kind of thing now that it's over, but we always have a bond that I'll never have with anybody else, because the cast and crew, I mean, I grew up with them. And so every single day I got to go to work, and yeah, it was work, but I love what I do. So I got to go and do what I love 5 days a week with people that I really enjoyed working with. And you get close to them, and you know about their families and what they're going through. And it's a once in a lifetime experience, especially that time frame of my life where, you know, you're so, I don't know if vulnerable is the right word, but you are, because you're developing who you are as a human being. I mean, it was from, my Dexcom's yelling at me because I have low blood sugar. But perfect timing.
Do you need to treat? Because, you know, I'm watching my sons too. No. So if you...
Yeah, do you have his Dexcom as well?
Yeah, I have it on my phone.
Yeah, no, my mom has the same thing. She is constantly texting me from like states away being like, hey, you need to eat. I'm like, I know, I got it. I'll grab some dark chocolate. Hold on.
Okay.
But anyway, what I was saying was that, yeah, I mean, it's from 14 to 18, you're developing who you are as a human. And so to experience that with people you really care about is a super special thing. So
tell me a little bit about the role of Harper, because as a mom watching the Disney Channel, there are a lot of beautiful, you know, like kids and role models and things. And you wonder, like, who is my kid going to latch on to? And then when my kids liked Harper, I was so happy because that was the whole package. She was funny and beautiful and smart and a true friend. And I know it's a character, not a real person, but that's a great role to play, because I've got to imagine a lot of kids identified with Harper.
Well, that means a lot to me that you say that, because I grew up that way. I was always a weird kid. I'm still a weird adult. But I mean, I never, like the girl next door cookie cutter thing, I didn't get that. Like, I don't understand that. I don't relate to that. It's great, sure, wonderful, but I don't get it. Like, it's not who I am. And so that was what I took those, I saw the character on the page in those 10 minutes when I went to audition for it, that I was thrown that character. And I wanted to make a character that was different and weird, and that was okay. And she was okay with being weird and wasn't embarrassed about it. And, you know, she let her freak flag fly proudly, because there needs to be more of that. It was good for me at the time because she inspired me while I was playing her. Because sometimes, especially, like I said, in that vulnerable 14 to 18 gap, like, there were times that she was a lot braver than I was at that time. And so I fed off of her bravery to be herself in times when I wasn't that strong at that age. But yeah, I wanted to create a character that was herself completely and was okay with that and wasn't embarrassed by that, because I feel like that needs to be shown, and it isn't shown enough.
Did you get to keep any of those wild costumes or props?
Oh, yes, I did. Come on, I had to take some of those. And they're never going to use them again because they're so distinct. So yeah, they let me take some of them home.
Oh, that's great.
I've had people that are like, yeah, I've had people that want me to like auction them off for things, and I love helping people, and I love giving to charities and things like that. The costumes I have a really hard time letting go of.
Oh yeah. That's fantastic. So I mentioned earlier that my son, when he found out I was talking to you, he wanted me to ask you a couple of questions, but what popped into his mind was actually about Selena Gomez, and this will actually lead into a question for you, I promise. But there's a part in the movie, and I apologize for those of you listening who've never seen this. You really should pause right now and go watch older episodes and the movie, because there's a scene, I hope it's in the movie because my son said it was, when Selena Gomez's Alex, she turns kind of into a backpack, but she's like running around. It's just like her legs in the backpack. And he was talking about how funny that was. And so he wanted me to ask you, were you all on set when they did the magic effects? Was it difficult to tape the magic parts? Was that fun? Was that hard work? What was that like?
It was a lot of, sometimes it's really, the magic was tedious because it has to be exact. There was a lot of times where we had to, like, for example, I'm not sure if we ever did this, but like if we changed costume or something, or if we flashed somewhere or whatever, we would have to match our body position exactly from the previous frame. So there were times where we literally would take like 10 minutes to exactly match every finger, every arm, to the previous frame. And so sometimes it would be really tedious, but it was a lot of fun. And I learned so much from it. And so I'll be on sets now and I'll just think back like, hey, thanks, Wizards, because with special effects, and it's so prevalent now in the industry. And so with all the special effects, shut up.
Is that your Dex?
Yeah, my pancreas is yelling at me. But so sorry about that. I'm working on it. But like in the business, special effects are so prevalent. So I learned so much about just like how, hey, you have to match this, you have to look here. If you don't imagine this quite like that, it's not going to look right. Like technically I learned so much. And at the end of the day, it's playing pretend. You know, when you do the special effects like that, you're playing pretend. So you get to go back to being that kid in the sandbox, you know? And so if you approach it like that, it's so much fun.
That's great. And are you sure you're okay? Because my audience will yell at me if I don't let you treat if you need to treat.
No. I'm okay. Literally eating.
Perfect.
I'm having chocolate right now.
All right.
So
that's good.
You're good.
Yes.
I'm just sorry that it keeps beeping.
Oh, no. Don't apologize. This is,
Because the way that I have it set up, it sounds like, because I like to have a sense of humor about it because, I mean, what else are you going to do? And the way that mine sounds when I'm low sounds like I lost, like, the video game. Which I always like to laugh. Like, my friends always laugh. They're like, what's happening? I was like, oh, it's okay. My pancreas lost this level. Don't worry about it.
I can't set mine to the baby crying. I know that a lot of people do that to wake up. But after
God, that's terrible.
Oh, after 2 children who I love dearly, who are now teenagers, I do not want to hear a baby crying for a few more years.
No, that's a terrible idea. I didn't even know that was a setting.
Oh, it's just a setting on the Dexcom that you can do that. I just go for the regular old
No,
one.
mine just sounds like Mario died. That's what mine sounds like.
So you have a new project for next year, right? Can you tell me about Santa?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's really cool because it's my first project back after taking a break. And like I said, I went to school for 4 years. I took a break. I kind of reassessed everything. And then I just realized I missed acting and I wanted to get back to it. So this is my first project back, and it's kind of perfect because it combines my school experience with my love for acting because it's with Capital Arts, and they're working in conjunction with Shenandoah University and their film department. And so we got to do this great thing where not only were we making this really great Christmas movie about this young girl who's Santa's daughter. It's kind of like a female elf almost. So you take this girl that's lived in the North Pole her entire life, you pluck her out and you put her in a college environment. What does that look like? You know what I mean? Right. And she sort of learns who she is on her own for the first time in her entire life. But it was cool because we got to take the film department at Shenandoah University and we got to sort of let them apprentice and shadow us on set so they could learn, you know? And like we have some of the students in the cast and, you know, we had them working on in the crew as well. Like, so we got to really immerse them in the process. And it's the first time I've ever seen a film department do that. And truly that's how you learn, is on set. So it was really a cool way to come back because it was not only getting back to what I love, which is acting, but it was also combining something new that I learned that I loved as well, which was education and the college experience. So it's been a really great way to sort of come back to work.
Yeah, that's great. How did it feel to be back?
Oh my gosh, it felt like coming home. I mean, I was worried I was going to be rusty and all that stuff because, like I said, I'd been 4 years, but it was like riding a bike. You know, it's in my. I've been doing it since I was 6. It's in my bones. It's who I am. Like I'm an actor, so it just felt right. I felt like I was where I was supposed to be again, and it felt really good to go back home.
That's great. And you mentioned you are now a part of Beyond Type 1, global ambassador with them. Mm-hmm. This is an organization, we've talked about them a lot before here on the program. Nick Jonas, one of the founders. Did you know him before? Is that somebody that you've worked with?
Yeah, I have actually. Disney is really great about synergy and sort of getting everybody involved together. And he and I actually worked together with a lot of the, all right, I got you. Beeping at me. Mario died again. We worked together a lot with a lot of the promos for Disney, as well as we did a healthy living campaign for Disney with Michelle Obama in Washington. So yeah, I had worked with him before, and I have a lot of respect for him and what he does, and especially the work that he's done with Beyond Type 1. I think it's really incredible. And to be honest, when we worked together, I didn't have diabetes. And so I respected the work that he did as an artist, but I have a newfound respect for him even more so now that I understand a little bit. I understand a lot more, actually, of what he goes through on a day-to-day basis. So I wish that when we were working closer together that I had this experience and could have understood and respected him on that level. But, you know.
I don't think you can, but I don't think you truly can until you experience Type 1.
You can't. And that's what I'm saying is, like, I wish at the time that I could have really looked at him and been like, hey, me too. But like I said, we all have our own journey and we all have our own timeline, and that just wasn't mine. But I have now, on the other end of it, I have a lot of respect for him and how he's chosen to approach it and how he's lived with it and thrived with Type 1.
You know, you mentioned the Disney promos. I have to ask you, as someone who watched that channel for years and years and years with my kids, did you do those? I can't remember, where you had the wand and you drew the Mickey ears?
Yeah.
What's that like to tape? What are you actually doing? Are you holding anything? What is that? What's going on when you're taping those?
Okay, so we're holding like a green stick, I think, and we're tracing. So they have like PVC pipe that's like shaped like the Mickey ears, right? And they tell you, and basically they put it into an entire day that's like all promos. And so everyone's tired and they leave it at the end of the day. And so basically we're being shuffled around at like interviews and teleprompters and commercials and all that stuff. So it's like a whole day of like promo stuff. And they leave it at the end of the day, which I always thought was a terrible idea. So like that YouTube video you see of like all the Disney actors that are like tired and like don't want to do it. That's why. It's at the end of this big promo
I wasn't going to bring that up.
No, it's okay. I'll bring it up. I know everybody wants to talk about it. It's okay. It's really hilarious because, like I said, having been there, I get it. Because, like I said, you get there at like 7 a.m. You're doing promos all day, and it's the last thing they have you do usually. And you get there, and they want you to come up with like some gag or something. And like you're like, well, what if I do this? And they're like, no, so-and-so already did that. Well, what about this? No, so-and-so already did that. Ugh. So by the time you actually get to something that somebody hasn't done, it's some derivative that makes no sense for you. So like for mine, I think I like drummed or something. Like something is so stupid. Like it made no sense. Like I've never drummed in my life. Like it made no sense. You know what I mean? And then you have to perfectly trace, again with effects, you have to perfectly trace this outline. If it's remotely off, they make you do it again. So by the end of it, by the time you actually get it, you're already tired when you start. By the time you get it, like it takes so long to get the ears exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's so like first world problems. I know that. I get that. Like we're all lucky to be there. But seeing that video and being on the other end of it, it made me laugh so hard because I'm like, yeah, I know exactly how they feel.
I love it. That's so funny.
But also having said that, growing up, like I said, I'd always wanted to be an actor. So I had seen people do that, and I was so jazzed. Like the promos, the interviews, all that stuff, I didn't care. Like I just wanted to get through that. I wanted to get to the ears. Like I just wanted to do the wand thing. That's all I wanted to do. So as tired as I was so jazzed. And everybody else was like, oh, shut up, Jennifer. Like, be quiet. Everyone's tired. And I was like, no, I'm super pumped. I'm super excited.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah, I was the annoying one that was still excited at the end of the day for that.
I love it. Any advice for somebody who is newly diagnosed? I mean, you know, you're still, I know 4 years seems like a long time, but you're still pretty new yourself. But it sounds like you're doing great. But is there any advice for somebody who's listening and maybe much newer?
You know, all I can say is that, yeah, when you're first diagnosed, it feels like the sky is falling. It feels devastating. But it's not going to stay feeling like that. Like I said, you have two choices. You can let it win. And I've known diabetics that have done that. You know, I've known diabetics that are like, screw this. I'm not going to adjust my eating habits. I'm not going to adjust my lifestyle. And they let it win, you know, and those are the ones that experience the vision problems and on the extreme side, the amputations, to be perfectly frank, especially coming from a nursing standpoint. I mean, it can get really bad if you don't take care of it. Or you can make the choice of like, you know what, this is not going to become who I am. This has become a part of my story, not the whole thing. And I encourage anyone who's newly diagnosed to take that front and say, you know what, no. this is a part of my story. This isn't the entire thing. This is going to be a chapter, and I'm going to be better because of this chapter. And to take the bull by the horns and just really, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be tough. There's going to be days you don't want to deal with it. I still have those days. But just get up and do the best that you can every single day to attack it as best that you can. Like my grandmother said, and I use this all the time, and it's so cheesy, but bless her, my sweet Southern grandma, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's exactly how I feel about diabetes. Like it's a lot of information. It's a lot to take on, but you just got to take it one bite at a time. Maybe low carb bites so you don't have a spike in blood sugar, but one bite nevertheless.
That's great. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for spending time with me. I really appreciate you sharing your story with my listeners. Can't wait to see the new movie. And I guess we'll be waiting until next Christmas.
I know. It's going to be a long wait, so I'm sorry about that. But thank you so much for your time and just, and for creating a podcast that gives people with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2, to go to and feel like, they're not alone in this. Because I think that's one of the biggest things that I know in my journey I've needed is to feel less alone in it. So thank you for creating a place for people to go to where they can feel that.
Wow, that means a lot. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Jennifer. I hope we can talk again soon.
I hope so too. Thank you so much.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Lots more information about Jennifer, her new movie. Since we spoke, she's actually got another one starting production, so there will be 2 likely in 2018. Very cool stuff. I will link up the hat song she talked about with Selena Gomez and that Disney video with the kids trying to make the Mickey ears. If you've ever seen that on the Disney Channel, you know what we're talking about. If you haven't, I highly recommend you check it out. A big thank you to Beyond Type 1 for helping set up this interview. Jennifer Stone is working with Beyond Type 1 now, and I will link up more information to them as well. And I always appreciate when people help out and reach out to people to get them on the show. So big thank you to the folks at Beyond Type 1. And I just want to say, this is something that was on my mind as I was listening back to the interview. I didn't ask her about Selena Gomez, her co-star there, right? I mean, she was kind of the sidekick to the Selena Gomez character in Wizards of Waverly Place. And my understanding is that they're very good friends. And I've seen some headlines that Selena Gomez's health issues and being open about that is why Jennifer Stone, one of the reasons why she came out to talk about diabetes. But, I was kind of reluctant to ask about her because I think that it's got to be tough that everywhere you go, people aren't always asking about you. They're asking about the other person. So it was probably a really dumb decision, right? If I'd asked about her, I could have put a headline that would have gotten a lot of clicks about Selena Gomez. Oh, well, maybe next time I'll wise up. But it seemed to me it was an interview with Jennifer, and it wasn't an interview about, someone else who's famous that she worked with. Let me know what you think. You can email me, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com. Okay, so from Jennifer, who was pretty recently diagnosed, to a woman who's been living with type 1 for almost 60 years in our Community Connections segment, meet Trudy Peters. I ran into her at a conference last year, and a lot of parents were asking for her advice, because she's lived a long time with type 1, she's healthy. So I asked her what kind of advice she likes to give.
I think I would tell them to prioritize what they have to know first. You can't know everything all at once. Make sure you get to the point where your child or yourself knows how to do the insulin, because without the insulin it's useless. But know the insulin, know what you're using, how you're using it, and then go from there. Once you get the insulin down, I would say then learn carb counting and how to use it, and how to, your scale and everything else. My favorite thing that I use is a book by Dr. Stephen Ponder called Sugar Surfing. I love it. It taught me that what I was doing for 50 years was right. And it's also helped me to kind of learn new tricks. So I've really enjoyed sugar surfing. But seriously, though, just take one step at a time, because you can't do everything all at once.
Curious, though, as an adult, obviously you didn't get a pump and a Dexcom diagnosis. So what made you, as an adult, decide to go for this kind of technology?
Oh, I wanted it to be easier. I was a teacher, And before I could take my students to lunch, or after I took my students to lunch, I'd have to run back to my classroom and do a shot. Because I was on, one for every meal, one at bedtime, one in the morning. You get the picture. So it was just terribly inconvenient. So I went with the convenience of it. And then I went with the Dexcom, the continual glucose monitor, because I've always, and I think we all have, I've always had serious lows. And convulsing in the middle of the night is not fun. And the Dexcom, I don't believe I've had one convulsion since I've been on the Dexcom. I've had some lows that I didn't hear or I missed or that it missed. It does miss. It's a machine. It's not perfect. But I think that's more it than anything. Just the ease of it.
I'm curious too, we had a wonderful woman talking to you about her newly diagnosed child, really a year in, is still newly diagnosed. Is it okay that parents kind of come over to you she was trying to do this carefully, but she kind of looked you up and down. Like, are you okay? Do you have everything? How's your health? I mean,
I don't mind it in the least. I've been blessed. I've been truly blessed. I know I've not always taken care of myself. I'm human. I've been a wife, a mom, a teacher. I'm a grandma now. And actually, all those things are what made me know I had to take care of myself. But as I went through college, there was an experience before glucometers and Dexcoms and everything else. But no, I have no problem with it. I'm more than happy to share with people because I think it's pretty cool that we can share with each other now.
Of course, we've talked about sugar surfing here on the show, as Trudy mentioned. And if you want more information, I'll link that up. We've interviewed Dr. Ponder, who is the author of Sugar Surfing, which is a way to manage type 1 diabetes in more in real time. They call it dynamic management. So you're trying to look at numbers more than every couple of hours, and rather than reacting, you're working in advance. You're trying to head things off, which is a very simplified way of putting it. But I will link up more information. Okay, I hesitate to share a lot of new studies or big headlines on the show every week because let's face it, most of them don't pan out, and others can take years, and a lot of the health headlines that you see on the news are just that, headlines. I know I was a TV health reporter for many years, so I'm careful what I share, but I did think this one was pretty fascinating, and it is our Now You Know segment brought to you by No Foods. And if you're trying to eat better in the new year, I highly recommend you check out No Foods. It's KNOW, and not just for whatever your New Year's resolution is, but for the long term as well. No Foods makes delicious products that they're bready, I like to say, like waffles and donuts and muffins, but without grain or gluten. Yeah, they make breadcrumbs, they make snack bars, they make buns. It's really cool stuff, and it's lower glycemic index. We really enjoy the chocolate chip muffins. I like the cinnamon cookies, and Benny loves the chocolate chip waffles. No grains, no gluten, no guilt. Give No Foods a try, and when you use the promo code Stacey10 at checkout, you will save 10%. Check them out at diabetes-connections.com. Click on the No Foods logo. This study caught my eye for a number of reasons. First, it is out of Cornell University, which is not that far from where I went to college, up in Syracuse, New York. I'm so sorry for the amount of snow you're getting, but you people are used to it up there. And the headline is really what caught my eye, which is Spider's Web inspires removable implant that may control type 1 diabetes. Now, this is a release that came out in very early this month, January 2nd. Again, this is not something that's available. This is an interesting paper. But this is a new method for implanting islet cells into people with type 1. Now, if you're familiar with this, you know that in type 1 diabetes, the insulin-producing pancreas cell clusters are called islets, and that's what's destroyed by the body's immune system. That's why your pancreas doesn't produce insulin, because the islets are destroyed. So there are several different studies that have already implanted these islet cells, transplanted them into people, and it has helped. In some ways, people have gotten off insulin for a short time. Sometimes they only need to take long-acting. something, but it hasn't been something that has worked in the numbers and with the efficacy that's needed to really make this something that is going to be available to lots and lots of people. What these researchers did was look at the way water beads on a spider's web. And then they connected the islet cell containing capsules like a web, kind of a string, but a web. They say it's actually better than a web because there aren't any gaps. And they think gaps here would be bad in terms of the risk for scar tissue. I can't pretend to really understand all of this, but we've covered implantation before, and the group ViaCyte, which is working on a transplant that would be within a protective coating. You may have seen that. It's kind of the size of a credit card, but it's an oval. I'll link up that past interview here as well. And I feel like with more study on this, we're going to get closer and closer to something that would be an option, a viable option when it comes to transplantation. I'll link up this article from Science Daily, of course, as well. The technique here has received patent protection, it says, by Novo Nordisk, and it was supported by funding from the American Diabetes Association, among many others. Interesting stuff there, and now you know. At the top of the show, I mentioned Benny's bar mitzvah and how there was something to do with the timing that I wanted to share with you. Listen, if you're not familiar, a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah for a girl is a ceremony in the Jewish faith which signifies that they are becoming a Jewish adult. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's the easiest way to describe it. Is it's a religious ceremony that really signifies the end of your basic childhood and the beginning of adult responsibilities. And in my family, it's just a continuation of faith and tradition, and I'm going to be an emotional mess on the day of Benny's, just like I was on the day of my daughter's. And I'm bringing this up here, not just to share with you this milestone in my family, but also because when Benny was diagnosed, he was 23 months old. And I remember sitting on the floor of the hospital room with our endocrinologist, Dr. V. And we sat on the floor because Benny was on the floor. He was playing. And gosh, that was one of the reasons I knew I liked Dr. V right away. He came in and he sat right down and he talked to Benny. And then I sat down and we all talked and kind of played together. But we talked at that time about what was out there, because I was a TV health reporter for many years and then a radio health reporter. And I had covered diabetes for many years. I had actually interviewed people in my local area. I knew people in Charlotte. So when Benny was diagnosed, I was able to pick up the phone and say, hey, you remember I interviewed you last year? Well, now I really need your help. I was very lucky that way. But I also knew enough about diabetes to know that things did not work quickly. I had seen failures. I had covered the Gluco Watch, which was this watch that was supposed to read your blood glucose through your skin, but it wound up burning people. Not so good. Things like that. So I wasn't interested in asking about a cure. I knew enough to know that wasn't something that I cared to talk about at the time, but I did want to know what was out there, what was coming. And Dr. V was really excited about what he called the artificial pancreas. And he said, I think that within 3 to 5 years, Benny will have a continuous glucose monitor and a pump. It will still be mechanical. It will still need some user input, but it will be much easier than anything that's come before it. Now, this was in the end of 2006. So if you followed along since then, you know that, 3 to 5 years was not the best guess. But I said at that time, as long as we have something like that by his bar mitzvah, I'll be okay. And Dr. V laughed, and I laughed, and I filed it away. And then I went back to learning how the heck to care for a kid, a toddler with type 1, when I'd never given an injection before. And we went back to that circus. But I can't help but think back to that day and think back to the thoughts I had, and now here we are. Do we have a true artificial pancreas? Kind of. The Medtronic 670 is so promising. I know several people who use it who love it. People using open APS showing that this can be done, and you don't have to work for a pharmaceutical company in order to have the knowledge to make it work. We have a tandem pump. They should have the low glucose suspend out by the end of 2018, working toward the automated system after that. So I do feel that, at least when it comes to the CGM technology, we have turned a corner. And I'd like to go back and tell myself, hey, his bar mitzvah is coming up, and that technology is coming out. But more importantly, he's okay, and you're okay too. And you've learned a lot, and you've been through a lot, and there's still a lot more to learn and a lot more to go. But I always thought about that milestone and thinking about it in terms of technology, and we're going to go past it. So what's the next milestone that I can think of? I guess it'll be college, right? I mean, he's in 7th grade. So what will be available by the time he's in college? I'll be honest with you. I've changed my mind quite a bit about what I hope for. And not just because I was actually quite optimistic. I actually think the technology is getting there. I'm less worried about that. I am more concerned now about access and about price. So I'm not going to beat you over the head with it this year, but I am planning on focusing on talking more about and learning more about what we can do as a community about the price of insulin. I think that's the big challenge for our community. So listen, thanks for letting me talk about all of that. That's the reason why I wanted to save it till the end of the show, because I was afraid too I'd get a little too sentimental or maybe a little bit too much on the soapbox. But I will let you know how Benny's bar mitzvah goes. I'm not quite sure the timing on this. I guess the next show I'm taping before, just because I need to get ready for all my relatives coming into town. So it'll be about 2 weeks before I can report back and let you know how it went. I'm so excited to see everybody, and we've got people coming from all over the country. Oh my gosh, it's going to be crazy, but it's going to be a lot of fun as well. Okay, as always, thank you so much to my editor, to John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions, who puts everything together and does such a great job. Thank you so much, John, for sticking with me. Please join the Facebook group if you haven't already. It's Diabetes Connections, the group, and that is growing every day. Love to see that. We're going to do some fun stuff in the weeks ahead. And follow on social media, because we have a contest every week now on the different platforms from No Foods. Really excited to be teaming up with them. We're giving away $50 every week in 2018. Sometimes it'll be on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, in the Facebook group. So cover all your bases. And I hope that you win. You know, I feel it's a privilege to spend an hour each week with people like you who get it. It's just wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.